I'll just get going. I'm Abby Rose. I'm a co-founder at Viticycle. Some of you already know what we do, but in case you don't, we make apps that support observation as a key tool for understanding what works on a farm or vineyard. And yeah, as I said, many of you may already use or be familiar with our tool Sectormentor, which is our app for vineyards. Sectormentor makes it easy to predict yields, monitor ripeness, understand soil health and biodiversity, track vineyard activities block by block, and much more. And more recently, we released the Regen dashboard in partnership with Nicole Masters. And that allows you to benchmark and track your regenerative viticulture journey using the 10 Regen indicators, as well as get tips and tricks from Nicole on how to improve them. So at Vitacycle, we're committed to building ecology, profitability, and beauty on farms around the world. And we're always exposed to amazing stuff that's happening. And our experience is like not enough people get to hear about this, especially the implementation details of a regenerative approach. So this series is about connecting the conversations, sharing knowledge, and highlighting the work of people like Jordy and others as brilliant resources if you want to take a more regenerative approach. So just as an intro, please, if you have any questions, there is a Q&A button. Please do type it in there in the Q&A area, and it will be visible to everyone, and you can upvote or downvote other people's questions using the thumbs up button. I can hear a bit of feedback. I don't know if you can, but hopefully that will calm down. And it's such a pleasure to be talking to you, Jordan Lonborg. Currently, Jordan is the regenerative consultant and manager of organic, biodynamic, and regenerative viticulture for Coastal Vineyard Care Associates, the longest title in the world.
It's a mouthful. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
But maybe it's showing the holistic and fullness of that role. And one of the reasons we're so excited to have you here today is because you are in this like very privileged position where you've spent a good amount of time as a vineyard manager on a specific site, implementing regenerative practices and really learning about the nitty-gritty of what it takes. And then now, in more recent years, you've been able to actually start to have that overview across multiple sites. What does it mean to consult with many others and start to experience the challenges and the wins across many different sites? And I think that's a really cool position to be in. And so we're really excited to dig into that a bit today and hear some of your experiences. So, yeah, if you want to maybe just share a bit about yourself, your current role, and a bit about your background.
Yeah. So, left Tablas Creek in February, and signed on with Coastal Vineyard Care Associates, CVCA. They're based out of Santa Barbara. And I had met them about 4 years ago consulting. I was kind of doing a little quiet consulting on the side, while working at Tablas, and it had just been a great relationship. So they provided me this opportunity. I think they, as a company, recognize that this is where the industry should be moving. There's so much interest in it, in their own community, mostly Santa Barbara, but it's hard to open any sort of publication now, in the wine world and not read that word. Um, so it was an opportunity for them to kind of offer something to their clients, that other vineyard management companies do not. And Coastal, they do care. They did shortly after I was hired, put out a statement. They erased glyphosate usage from all of their properties across the board, which is a pretty big statement for a vineyard management company of their size. Many vineyard management companies will cater to the client, and they put their foot down. So I consult on a handful of properties in Santa Barbara County, a handful of properties here in San Luis, and a rather large client in Napa. And just like you said, I mean, it has been such an eye-opening experience to not only um, step foot on this ground and in these vineyards, but to have these conversations with these different property owners and engage both their interest, their previous knowledge of the topic, what outcomes that they're hoping for. And my client list is everywhere from a very small family-owned situation, just a couple of employees, all the way up to large-scale ownership, national distribution of their wines, huge marketing department, and yeah, so it's fun. Like on that side, I also get in and it's like I'm helping that marketing team. And like
Hmm.
these are the moments, this is the message that you need to start sharing with the tasting room staff, any sort of your social media platforms. So it's kind of gone. I've even given um, footwear recommendations to some of their vineyard staff in the vineyard. So it's been really fun. It's been super
Yeah.
fun. I had been at Tablas Creek for 9 years, almost to the day, and it's an incredible property on the west side of Paso Robles. They've been farming certified organic since 2003. They started playing with biodynamics in 2010 on a portion of the vineyard. That's kind of when the sheep first showed up. I rolled in there in 2016. We we were started to discuss what expanding certification to the entire property would look like. In 2017, we ended up certifying Demeter across all planted acreage. And then in 2018, we were approached, late 2018, we were approached after, well, there's a wine dinner that Neil Collins had with Yvonne Chouinard was there, and he had learned about the certification. Neil kind of threw Tablas's name in the hat. We were approached by them in late 2018 and started that pilot journey in 2019. Initially, I didn't really want anything to do with the certification, just knowing how much work they take and time at desk. But when I got to that social welfare pillar, I was fully on board. It really was a powerful message and statement to get behind. Um,
And
and Tablas is, what's
that's the
that?
ROC, the Regenerative Organic Certified certification. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, Regenerative Organic Certified. We became the first vineyard in the world to receive that, and subsequently the first vineyard in the world to achieve the gold level of that certification, which they maintain to today. And the property itself was just incredible. It's a biodiverse system. Really, the goal was to biomimic what you see in nature, right? Diversity is crucial. They were definitely in that on that path when I had joined that team, and then when I started learning from about biodynamics. Which was an eye-opening shift. I mean, I came out of school and took a job in Monterey County. I was on a part of a team that managed 5,000 acres of wine grapes in Monterey County, uh, and across two vineyards. I started as a vit tech, became a PCA, eventually viticulturalist PCA. I was managing a multi-million dollar pesticide budget, and we'd spend every last penny. And in that amount of time that I was there, I watched resistance occur within some of the insects that we were trying to control. I watched resistance occur in some of the weed species that they were trying to control, and just like there was something really wrong with that picture and that model. So the opportunity to work, Neil Collins, I had no business getting that job at Tablas Creek. I think we got along on a personal level, and he took a chance on me, I'm forever indebted to him for hiring me and putting me on this path.
And
But it was just that opportunity to work at a place where these decisions on a majority of vineyards around the world, you'd be looked at like you were kind of crazy, and there those decisions were supported. So yeah, I could talk all day about that experience, but
well, I guess one thing I'd love to hear is, in your time there, are there and is there anything you learned, maybe particularly in when you were kind of focusing on a regenerative approach that you still kind of are using in your knowledge base today? Are there any key learnings that you really took away from it?
so many.
What are your
Uh,
favorites then?
Well, I think on the positive side is this diversity piece. Doing everything you can to maximize diversity in every single inch of your property. So whether that is in your cover cropping, um, very diverse cover crop mixes. If you have areas of the property that maybe have access to irrigation, creating perennial habitats so you're not having to plant annual beneficial insectaries, really creating um, a home for those insects to overwinter and thrive and move into your system. Um, I think those pieces to me, I think will always stick with me. I on a soil sampling mindset. One thing I started doing once we had the ROC certification, I would sample non-cropped, untouched portions of that property to have this baseline, this North Star of what that land could be, right? So you go to the edge of a woodlands, at the edge of the forest, something that a tractor has never been on, soil has never been turned, in a natural setting with no human influence, that number is a really important number to have, I think, for most properties. If you have the ability to sample from an area like that, because will tell you so much about just like the capabilities of that soil and that system. Um, and it can be really cool because there were moments and there are areas of that property where we surpassed uh, soil organic matter and soil organic carbon and microbial biomass within a farm setting. So it can provide a lot of credence to your strategies, and you can improve upon lands much past their baseline. I also learned a lot of hard lessons there too. I mean, we weren't a data driven system. A lot of the way we were farming there was by observation and whether or not it made sense. And, I guess, for instance, grazing animals, they're depending on your context. I say this with a firm point of view. Context is everything. If your context is to save mowing passes or eat weeds, that's a whole different style of grazing animals. If your context is building biology and improving fertility, uh, that picture looks entirely different. So we can talk about this later on, but some of the mistakes that we made took years for us to recover from in terms of compaction and vine damage. So learning those lessons, I think in livestock integration, and it is an important piece of regenerative. I don't think it's an essential one, but you see across so many vineyards in the state and probably globally incorporating animals. And there, I see pictures sometimes where I just cringe. It's like, I don't, they're going to be making the same mistakes that I'm making. So being able, I have made. So having that perspective and that experience with, carrying capacity and how much time in a block those animals should be, there is really, it's a powerful bit of information,
Hmm.
to have. And then just, yeah, there's so many other things. I mean, I often have these moments, where if I could go back, uh, some of the changes that I would make, in regards to nutrient cycling and just kind of focusing on the biology a little bit more rather than the tangible pieces that we're all kind of familiar with in the regenerative piece. I mean, my conversation about regen 5 years ago would be a completely different one than it is today. And I think it's really one of the beautiful parts of regen as a whole is that this is constantly evolving. What it was 10 years ago in a vineyard is not what it is today. And
Hmm.
what it will be 5 years ago from now will largely probably be very different than what we're talking about.
Mm. Which is so exciting. That's what, I guess
Yes.
that's part of what makes it exciting, is it's an ever evolving state and practice and learning, co-learning. Um,
Yes.
and maybe we could just jump into that. So, the idea that your thinking has really evolved from where you were 5 years ago. Yeah, can you dig into that a little more or explain what you mean?
Yeah, yes. I guess we're coming from a biodynamic mentality, having just certified that whole property. So this idea of a closed loop system and reducing the amount of off-farm inputs, as much or wherever possible was a goal for us. And I believe that that's a very it's a great mentality to have. It forces you to think out of the box quite a bit. Um, and we had built up our soils to a point where, I mean, there are very few spots on that property if you were to run analysis where we would be deficient in anything. I mean, maxed out across the board, on macros and micros in a lot of cases. Um, um, and then, the organic matter and active carbon, like maxed out across the boards, yet on the same hand, there were definitely years where it looked like the vines were struggling,
Hmm.
and like looking at those two pictures and you're saying, well, why, like where is the missing link here? And I think I was so dead set on this mentality of this closed loop system that I didn't pay enough attention to the role that biology has and the ability that we have as farmers to bring products on board that can assist in making that process a little bit more functional, really kind of connecting that dot of the symbiotic relationship between the grapevine itself and the soil biology. We're growing plants and rootstocks on ground. They're not native to this soil. So how are we to like how can we expect that the native bacteria or fungi to create this relationship with these plants that aren't from our system? That's not a natural process. So I think you can only get so far when you're thinking in those terms. And fortunately, we hired this gal, Erin Mason, and she really challenged me on every level. Didn't have a huge background in agriculture, but so well read and so into the system and the science, At first, it was a lot. It was a lot. I took a lot of her questions personally, to be honest with you. It was like, oh, like she doesn't know I've been da 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 da. There's that ego was getting in the way. Um, but I cracked, and eventually I did. I started listening, and I started, a lot of recommendations on podcasts, and I started digging in. And the dots started to connect in my mind. And it was like, sometimes you just need to hear someone say it. Sometimes, like a guy like John Kempf or Dijkstra or Klaus Martin. And it's like these concepts that are staring at you in the face for so many years. You just hear that one sentence out of their mouth and
Hmm.
the light bulb goes off, So I think it's, thank you, Erin, if you're watching. And just like it's so important to like as a farmer, if you're getting into the system, to really just put your ego aside and clean the slate and act as if you have no background, you have no history. You may like really to just open your mind to a lot of these concepts because some of them um, are a lot for people to wrap their head around. When you're talking about rhizophagy and bacteria moving in and out of a plant and depositing nutrients where that plant's deficient, and then going back outside of that plant and sending off signals, and like the idea that there is this level of intelligence in soil and in plants that I think is so far beyond anything we were ever taught in a school system. Accepting that as fact is a huge first step. And I know that there are a lot of generational farmers in the world of agriculture that are beholden to this UC or this college taught system that puts us at the top of the food chain. We're at the top of the pyramid and we're in control, and we are not in control. We are a piece of this puzzle. We are a cog in the wheel. As a regenerative farmer, it's your job to help and nudge along that process. So yeah, I learned so much from that place.
Hmm.
I hold it very close to my heart. I always will.
It's amazing. And well, I have a few questions off the back of that, but maybe I'm just going to jump into um, some of your kind of perspective as a consultant. So as you know, as you have been working with many different people who say, I want to take a regenerative approach or they're wanting to head in that direction. And one of the things you told me is that there's often a lot of confusion of where to start or how to start, what steps you take. So maybe you could share a little bit about, in that situation, how do you help people or maybe have an example of what that looks like?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the first the first conversations are really about mindset. It's that's where it all begins, and this idea of biomimicry, recognizing that there are very few weeds in a system, right? Most of the plants that you, the property owner, have been calling weeds are actually not. So kind of pushing the reset button as to what a vineyard should look like in theory, right?
Hmm.
The last thing you want to see is this like 90-degree angles, just grapevines and grasses, or just dirt. Um, you want when you walk onto a property, you want diversity. You want grapevines and then a whole bunch of other stuff. You want to see birds, you want to see insects, you want to see all sorts of plants and trees. That's like really the first step is like getting them to wrap their head around what a biodiverse system looks like. And maybe even going into the power of biodiversity. And then from there, it's about past farming practices. So if conventional herbicides or fungicides have been a part of the system, most importantly, systemics, those are gone. You have to stop using systemic products. And providing avenues or alternatives becomes a part of that conversation. Once we kind of get through that baseline sampling, so one of the areas, as far as the soil test is concerned, I'm starting to lean on like Haney PLFAs in that first year baseline, and even maybe a bulk density in that first year. Uh, Moving down the road, you could probably get away with doing the PLFA and the bulk density every 3 years or so, and just leaning on that Haney. But really getting those baselines, because without them, you could be performing a practice, say it's grazing or even cover cropping with certain species, thinking you're doing the right thing, only to find out 2 or 3 years down the road that you were not doing the right thing, that you were actually hurting your soil. So without having some sort of baseline to measure your practices, and this is what regen is. This is kind of what separates it from biodynamics in many ways, is this data-driven style of farming. Um, so, really, really stressing the importance of getting baseline data at the very least, and then it just starts getting fun. You're walking around. I don't touch a vineyard now without a shovel in my hand. We're digging holes. We're burying our nose in handfuls of soil and getting deep breaths of that, and just trying to show them. And if say they're medium, say they've been farming conventionally, and it smells kind of inert. You find that part of the property that's never been farmed, and you grab that shovelful and show them like this is what your soil should be smelling like. This is the texture that we're looking for. There's really fun tests you can do, like the slake test or the slump test, which is real visual. Um, and it's just all those little steps start kind of falling into place. We'll develop a calendar to give people an idea of what we should be doing and when we should be doing it. Like typically, I'm making monthly visits, on-site visits. So I'll give them a rough idea of what each month's visit is going to look like. Um, and then it depends on the site. If they're wanting to integrate animals, we'll go down that path. If it becomes a move towards no-till, we'll look at avenues that they should be taking to get to that point. Um, yeah,
And sometimes you mentioned that sometimes as a consultant, it can be a little more daunting because people act without necessarily waiting for or without necessarily asking your point of view. And that maybe that people don't recognize, I guess it's like going back to your animal integration point. It's like people don't recognize that just because it's a regenerative practice doesn't mean that it's definitely going to have a regenerative outcome. So maybe you could give an
yeah.
example of, or you gave me a good example of that.
Yeah, this is a learning process for me. I have learned that I need to be very clear about the distinction, and maybe right off the bat, drawing that line in the sand. For example, with animal integration. We all see sheep in vineyards, and I that's what I think in my first visit to Tablas Creek with Neil. I mean, it was like, oh my God, well, that makes sense. Like, I'm gonna put sheep in the vineyard there. eating the cover crop, like I didn't understand the why or the importance or the benefits, but it made a ton of sense. Um, but that said, without understanding the why from a regenerative mindset, uh, you can have very different goals or outcomes as say a grazing outfit would have. Maybe that grazing outfit, they want to get as much feed off of that land as possible, right? And if you as a property owner don't understand I guess the downsides of a scenario like that, you can get into a lot of trouble really quickly. So, I had a client, they called me super excited. Oh, we got sheep on the property. It's great. There's 300 of them there. And I'm like, oh, oh my gosh. Where, like, how big are their pens? Da da da. And I was in the car that weekend getting down there, and it was very obvious. We walked into the block that they had just been in, and it was very difficult for me to get my shovel into the ground. And I took a shovelful out, and all of the earthworms that were in that soil were squeezed into the top inch. So, the sheep had, in theory, most likely had been in that block too long. They had compacted the upper 8 inches of the soil and essentially pushed all of that macrobiology right to the surface for oxygen. And it was this stunning contrast. There was no root development. Everything was kind of choked up in this shovelful of soil. And then we went to the next paddock where the sheep were about to go to, and I just buried my shovel right away. It went right into the ground, all the way up to the top of the shovel. Bare mostly. I mean, I put a little bit of pressure on it with a foot, pulled out that shovel full. The roots were fully expanded throughout that shovel and that soil profile. There were earthworms and some beetles and some ants that were evenly distributed. You had all the earthworm holes, those carbon pathways that were still intact, and it was just this beautiful, like side by side of how quickly things can go wrong. We're
Hmm.
talking 2 days, 3 days. Um, where there may be quite a bit of rebound time. I don't think it was catastrophic by any means. I've seen ground that was worse, but it was this eye-opening moment for them, the property owners, where they have the best of intentions of doing this thing that everybody talks about in the regenerative world. They're doing the right thing. They're getting animals in, but they just they didn't understand the potential for you know a very negative outcome.
Hmm.
So those are, and that was again, I had told them that we had talked about it, but I didn't stress it enough. So it's this again, this learning experience for me of like maybe we think about those things like the no-till philosophy or the animal integration, the things that really should be end goals.
Hmm.
These are things that if you can get to a point where you can integrate animals or move towards no-till practices, you've made it. You understand the system, you understand how it works. But to go straight into that mentality, there could be some major consequences you pay in between. So I think it was a great learning exercise for me of like maybe in those first couple meetings, you have those discussions of the real sexy sides of regenerative viticulture, agriculture that everyone wants to do and say, yeah, like we can get here, we can do this, but understand like there's quite a few steps we need to do and make before we get to that point.
Got it. And in terms of those steps, obviously you talked about mindset and baseline, and then you've also referenced the idea of inputs potentially being required in the early stages, particularly. Um, Yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything more on the input side. Like, I guess what I'm getting from all, like, context is everything, and there's just so many questions to all of this. It's like, how do you even start to interrogate what kind of input you might want to introduce? Because obviously, there's a lot of people out there trying to sell you a lot of things, and they all seem amazing, of course. So, how do you start to discern what's good or not, and what would you advise people to look out for, I guess?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, there's so many companies out there selling you, trying to sell products, and like the reality is, and I had some really amazing conversations with um, some people at this Nexus event I went to in Arizona, and the reality is like, a lot of these products are context based. Like just because they don't work on your site doesn't mean they don't work on another soil type, right? So like before you just start buying things, I guess having a frame of reference or knowing someone locally that has used things with success is obviously really helpful. But I guess there is one concept, well, it's not really a concept anymore, I guess. Surrounding nitrogen, for instance, and the effect that it has on um, the relationship between soil biology and your plants, your vines, right? So, uh, in the perfect system, your plant, whatever you're growing, is producing root exudates. So basically carbon. It's a byproduct of photosynthesis. And those root exudates are released from the grapevine roots. And that is a food source for your biology. That's their reward system, right? So the healthier the plant, the more the root exudates. The more photosynthesis that plant is converting or conducting, the more root exudates, the happier the biology. Um, it's that carbon is a reward system for the biology. So I kind of touched on the rhizophagy process here, and we're now like we're observing bacteria moving in and out of plants and depositing nutrients where that plant is deficient, when it's deficient, and then signaling to the larger community when it moves outside of the plant. Um, this plant, we need more of this, right? So it signals out, and this biology, these bacteria will go and mine that for you, right? So they're the farmers. Uh, I think, in agriculture for so long have relied on nitrogen. Um, it works. You see results, right? You see results. It's like, oh, I put that nitrogen on there, and look how that plant grew. You see results, but the reality is what is happening on like a physiological side is the nitrogen that you use, especially conventional forms, prevent plants from producing as many root exudates as they could. So you sever that tie uh, between the symbiotic relationship between the soil biology and the plant itself. So I guess like how do I decide or what do I talk about? Well, that's one of the first things I talk about is we need to rethink nitrogen and how it's used in a vineyard system. Foliar applications first, right? That ideally, if we can address deficiency through foliar applications, that is a much more efficient route. You're going to use less product, and more of it's going to be taken up. Um, but in terms of product additions, a lot of that is going to come down to like that Haney test is going to tell you which nutrients are in your soil in a form that the plant can take up.
Mhm.
It is not your basic standard soil test that just tells you what's in there, and it doesn't. It has no. There's no information in regards to like what's plant available. I don't know that we ran a Haney test at Tablas. We were just running. We had some basic soil competition or composition tests there, and maybe that was part of that weak link. So, understanding that soil test and kind of addressing it from there. There's another test you can tap on or tag onto that Haney test that will tell you all of the nutrients that are in your soil but aren't plant available. So if you look at those side by side, um, then that can kind of start directing your program a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, I have seen, I mean, I think, I have moved into this pattern of not making any inputs to, I was making injections to feed biology in December. The plants have been dormant for 2 months, basically. And I'm injecting certain products, I can't, I don't want to, can I give plugs?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. Working with AEA, we're putting in Sea Shield and Rejuvenate and Taino mycogenesis and inoculating prior to a rainstorm. And I'm feeding biology. I get a call from the guy that oversees that vineyard, and he's like, "What are you doing, spending money on fertility in December? It's like the plants are dormant." I'm like, "I'm not feeding the plants. This isn't about the plants. This is to kickstart biology." And fortunately, we're working with agrology on this property, so agrology, we're using these canisters and measuring soil respiration, CO2. Like the more soil respires, the more biological activity. It's a byproduct of a healthy biology is CO2. Um, so we make these injections, and you see that CO2 spike. So it isn't just like this bugs in a jug mentality. There is tech available now, and if you want to apply it in a regen space, that can really justify some of these
Mhm.
practices in real time. I watched soil respiration increase on some of the foliar applications I made over the growing season. I would spray. It was probably a micronutrient mix along with some seaweed and kelp extracts and a fish emulsion. And 3 days after that application, I was watching CO2 just straight out of the ground, and it was just justification for these foliar applications. They are making their way through the plant and into that root system. There
Mhm.
was a significant effect there, not to mention just the observational growth pattern of the vines. And I was picking cab October 10th at 24 and a half, 25 bricks. And every property around me that had cab, I mean, it's still sitting on the vines. It's getting pruned off right now. So that this year was like an eye-opening moment for me in the power of foliar programs. Going to be working with AEA and SAP analysis on a handful of properties this year. Really excited about the work they're doing in that realm. And the SAP analysis is, it's like it's a blood test. You're
Mhm.
taking them every 3 or 4 weeks, and you're addressing deficiencies before you see them in a plant. And the idea is really just keeping that plant in the healthiest state possible, so you continuously feed the biology, and you get that nutrient cycling working in your system.
But do you think though, like kind of in parallel with this mindset, is that ultimately there is still the aim with regen that your inputs would, on the whole, go down over time. So this is like
Uh,
the
a
beginning.
hundred percent, 100%, right? I mean that's AEA's business model. It's like if you stick with us for 5, 6 years, you're not going to need us anymore. This is
Mhm.
not Monsanto saying you need glyphosate you need pre-emergent for the rest of that vineyard's life. Their goal is to get you away from that, right?
Hmm.
So by using cover cropping or animal integration and really getting your nutrients where they need to be in the soil, you're doing this in a natural way, and then you get that biology functioning. In theory, you can start to walk away from a lot of these inputs altogether.
Mm,
That's the goal. That is the goal. Like, let's get nature doing what it's supposed to be doing, especially on systems that were farmed conventionally for a number of years, right?
totally.
You need to get involved. You need to be proactive. You can't just like plant cover crop and put sheep out there and be like, okay, we're regenerative now. Like it doesn't, that's not how it works. So yeah, the goal is always to reduce inputs over time. And we're not talking about it like it may sound like this is all a ton of money. It's just not real. I've been involved in a couple budgets since I've left Tablas, and it's I'm like I'm doing everything I want to be doing, and I'm not spending much more than a conventional system. But what I am doing that's different is building biology, not destroying it.
Hmm.
Right. So you're getting this added benefit of promoting vine health through this system rather than just being the puppeteer and spoon feeding a drug addict, that's going to rely on you for the rest of its life. Maybe that's job security. I don't know. Um, but yeah, the goal is essentially to to totally relax on the input side.
Yeah. I have one question that Jake Wicks has asked. He
Hi,
says
Jake.
he says grazing has been mentioned a few times. And I know you already did kind of go into some detail on the pros and cons, but I guess, just putting yourself in the mindset of Jake's actually based in the UK, and, if he's considering grazing in his vineyards, what is it that he needs to be looking out for, thinking about, or what are the questions he needs to be asking in terms of grazing and whether it's the right time to introduce it or and how to go about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're, hmm, I would, I know the UK, you guys get a lot more rain over there. The context is a big part of this. We are, you get through the grazing season and you get into the growing season in California, and it turns into this semi-arid climate. So
Hmm.
we don't have this opportunity of seasonal rainfall for plants to rebound as quickly as other parts of the world. So, from I guess a really broad perspective, a good mentality to have in when you're going into a grazing season, it's not about how much ground cover or cover crop is left. Don't ever base your movements uh, uh, on the fact that like you have 3 inches of a ground cover or cover crop left. So now it's time to move them. I think high density, rapid movements are gonna help you achieve your goals in a regenerative mindset in most systems. Those animals are there to stimulate root systems for the most part. They digest, like say if you have legumes, they'll digest those plants and there's a lot of nitrogen in the legumes leaves. That nitrogen is then processed through their rumen, released in manure, and becomes a form that's usable by the plant. But I'd say that the real important part of having animals in a system is this biology piece, right? So if you have a very diverse cover crop, you're going to attract many different families of fungi and bacteria. That's the goal, right? You want everybody to have a piece of the pie, everybody to play their role. There's some bacteria that's really good at mining this nutrient. There's other bacteria that's really good at mining that nutrient. So having as many of those families in the system as possible is important. And by grazing, your that interaction is this inherent natural process between the plant and the animal's saliva that stimulates those root systems way faster than, say, running over it with a rotary mower, right? So they play that role in really pushing those root systems and establishing the biology. I would say if you are looking at it or first getting into it, rapid movement, really like get the erase the possibility of compaction or overgrazing environment. And by doing that, moving them faster through smaller paddocks, you're not gonna you won't make that mistake because the other side to that coin can take a long time to rebound from. So when you incorporate animals, if you're using a contract grazing outfit and they say, we're going to help you with your weeds and save you a couple mowing passes, those are red flags, right? That's not what a regenerative farmer is putting animals in a system. I said it, I think I said it earlier, but I would like judge a successful pass if I had to mow more. Um, so yeah, I think just doing it very carefully uh, and time in the block. Don't look at how much biomass is left, so to speak, in the beginning, until you kind of get more comfortable with the system.
So what I hear you saying is undergrazing is much preferable to overgrazing in the beginning. And that
Yeah,
also, when you say rapid movements, I'm assuming you're saying like basically daily.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. In a perfect world, and that's hard to do. I mean, in a perfect world, you're moving them every 24 hours. Uh, but I understand there's a lot of limitations there. So, like trying to hone in on like how small can your window be, and then that might dictate the size of your pen,
Hmm.
and the stocking rate or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, less is more in the beginning for sure.
And I guess the risk with sheep, going back to your diversity piece in the beginning, is like um, sheep like to go back and eat down their favorite things, and they will return quite quickly to eat their favorite things. So if you're not moving them fast enough and they're allowed to return to the same sites, then overgrazing, you may not even notice it, but that'll start to
Yeah.
reduce your diversity basically.
Yeah, no doubt. They're super picky. Sheep are super picky. They like to group. If there's a rain event on the way, they're going to huddle up and they're going to sit in that one little zone for an extended period of time. Like we were always, if it was more than a half or three quarters of an inch early in the season, those sheep are off the vineyard until we get good root systems established.
Hmm.
So there's a lot like their hooves, the hoof pressure on a sheep is pretty intense, which is why I'm looking at cattle. Um, there you can make some significant mistakes very quickly. If their nutrition isn't right, they can start targeting your vines, looking for those other minerals or nutrients that they might not be missing in your cover crop. So, that's the other part of like if you're planting a cover crop and you're wanting to integrate animals, really think about that blend and like make sure that there's a good portion of that blend that is dedicated to the nutrition of livestock.
Mm. So Sue Patrick has said, would you consider using ducks or geese in a vineyard?
Yeah, I mean, by diversity, I love it. I love it all. I don't know much about the manure on ducks or geese. I've heard lots of cool things about their ability to just hammer insects. But I mean, that's the pinnacle. The goal, I think, is like having this multi-species herd where you're pushing larger mammals through and then maybe following it up with some pigs and then following it up with the birds, chickens or geese. Um, the context is everything, and how much there's a lot of labor involved when you're looking at incorporating animals. So seeing where that fits into your budget and just, starting slowly is really important.
Mhm. Totally. Jake says, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And I see we're getting very close to the end of time. I knew this would happen.
Can we
It's
keep
because
going?
no. It's because you're full of good information. And so, yeah, thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything else you definitely want to make sure that you say before I close up. Yeah, anything else you'd really like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to be paying attention to some of the leaders in this movement, whether that is people like John Kemp or Ray Archuleta or Klaus Martin or any of these people that have been doing this a long time and that are pushing the science. Being aware of how quickly this space is evolving is really, really, really important. Understand the soil biology and the tangible pieces, but if you want to fast track some of this soil biology and these systems, there are things we can do to expedite the process as farmers.
Hmm.
The natural process is an efficient one, but it's very slow. There are things we can do that will speed that process up and we can see results. I think that's really, really important is really, digging into some of the podcasts, Acres podcast, Green Cover podcast, Regenerative Agriculture podcast. Listen to the stories and the experiences of people that have been doing this for a very long time. This is not a new system. And then if you're starting out, get systemics, just sell them, get them off your farm. Don't ever look at them. Find a different way. Um, I think if you want to move into animal integration and no-till, walk very slowly into those pieces of it. There's a lot of things you can do before those steps are taken that can really promote soil biology, soil function, and diversity. Um, I think those are the three things I would really want to stress for anyone that's kind of looking into this system.
Mm.
And then the last thing, you are never done. You will never touch the top of this mountain. This is continuous improvement, year in, year out. Problems in the vineyard. Those are areas to learn. Those are areas to expand your knowledge of this system. Look at problems as if they're opportunities, but understand like no matter how many certifications you have, you are never going to be done in this world. You are always pushing. You are always paying attention to the science, and you are always trying to improve.
Mm. Thank you. Love it. I love that. I feel like it's a real Californian spice to end it all. See the problems as opportunities. That's kind of thing my mom and dad would say.
Ah, I love it. I love it. I love
Um,
it.
but yeah, so thank you so much, Jordan. That was brilliant. So great to hear your insights and so much experience and enthusiasm and knowledge. So I really appreciate that. Um, and thank you everyone who's asked questions and been listening. If you're interested to hear more about Sectormentor, you can email us at info@vitacycle.com. And we will send a follow-up email early next week with the video of this recording and links to where you can find out more about what Jordan's doing. You can
Yeah,
also,
feel free to throw my email on
okay,
there. I'm happy to chat about any of these concepts with anybody on the side, and I'm looking forward to season two.
absolutely fabulous. And also, you've been following our email um, education course that we just released. And we're going to add a few more tips from you to it. But for anyone who hasn't seen that already, that's something to flag. We'll send a link to that as well if people want to sign up. It's a 7-day course where you can learn more about some of the things we've been talking about today, really. And then the final thing to say is that Tuesday next week at the same time, we will be doing a Regen Viti series with Maria from Enterprise Vineyards, which is a vineyard management company in Sonoma. They're an organic and regenerative vineyard management company. So that'll be really great to see previous episodes in the series and access the amazing practical insights from people like Jordan and many others. Please do head to the Regen Viticulture Hub on our website, vines.viticycle.com.